Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Wednesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this first day of July. My goodness, we're halfway through the year here, and now today is that magical mystery moment in the water year where we reset the counter for snow for the entire season. We count snow from July 1 all the way through June 29, June 30, and then we started over again on July 1st. So today is the first day that we can actually say Anchorage set the lowest seasonal snow total in recorded history, 25.1 inches. That is horrendously below the normal there. So watch for more information on that. We'll issue a statement probably a little bit later in the evening if you want the full statistics there. You can see that on the climate log too if you like to poke around on the website. What website you say? Well, you can say it with me, arh.noaa.gov, weather.gov/Alaska, or Anchorage/Juneau/Fairbanks will get you to all the right places that serve your community and village around Alaska. The weather info line is open at 800-472-0391. You can find us on Facebook. We've been sharing a lot of information about fires and smoke. Just yesterday, the folks in southeastern Alaska from the Juneau National Weather Service office were talking about the low pressure system working across the Gulf and moving northeast. You can find information on that and updated conditions there, as well as Twitter and on YouTube, of course, with your daily afternoon map briefing. Let's talk about what's going on right now and into the next couple days. The first concerns are rain. And if you're in the interior, you're going, yes, rain. This is finally raining across Deltana and Tanana Flats region. Healy yesterday, and since yesterday, has gotten a pretty decent soaking. I'll have that number for you shortly. And we're watching for flooding conditions, mainly on the Good Pasture River, and some of that could extend into the Deltana and Tanana Flats region. Some of the streams may also come up. So if you've got some fishing plans or just some travel plans that take you in that general direction, or you live down by the river, keep in mind that the waters could be coming up fairly quickly, and if you're in a flood-prone spot, it's probably a good idea to think about how are you going to get out of that flood-prone spot quickly if you see the water starting to come up or you have a decent amount of rain upstream that you know about. Well, the purple shade, that's not great. That is dense smoke, and dense smoke advisories will continue in the region as long as we have fires burning. A lot of that poor quality air is going to linger near the surface in many locations, not to mention just really reduced visibility. If you're flying or whether you're just walking around, it's not good news to be out and about in that. So take precautions if you need to, and if you have sensitive breathing conditions there, you want to factor that into your plans for the day. Fire danger still remains pretty high across most of the region. Now, as we're going into the 4th of July period, many of us like to celebrate with a little bit of extra flash and bang, and the Independence holiday across many parts of the United States usually includes the fireworks and sparklers and things like that. Well, the problem with that, of course, this time of the year is conditions, despite the rainfall we're receiving right now in some areas, still really tinderbox dry. In fact, in some cases, it's extreme as you get up around the Yukon Valley and points north. This will continue to change as the weather patterns change into the weekend, but keep in mind it's important for every one of us in all the Alaska communities and villages, cities, to be extra careful, and no place is really truly safe from wildfire danger right now across the mainland of Alaska. So do your part to help keep our Alaska community safe as we go through the next 3 to 4 days and beyond with fireworks and fire danger. So here's the numbers we were talking about with rainfall over the Healy fire. This is great news reported from one of the incident meteorologists that's serving the wildfire community there in the command post. 1.4 inches of rain earlier this afternoon reported since earlier this morning over the fire itself. So that is wonderful news. Of course, the folks continue their battle there. Heavy rainfall is possible over the Goodpasture River eastward, and in fact, for some areas south from the Alcan border into the Deltana and Tanana Flats region, could see as much as 1 to 1.5 inches of rain. So again, watch for the river rises and stream rises there. Some of that could happen fairly quickly. And I've already told you about the 25.1 inches of measly snow for Anchorage. But that all feeds into the weather situation that we're seeing right now, of course. This is just one number in one place in south central Alaska. Low snow is an issue for many parts of Alaska, especially in the Susitna Valley and up around Healy, including areas around the Sockeye Fire and beyond, and certainly the Card Street Fire in the Kenai Peninsula. So this is just one little marker in a pretty strange year for southern Alaska, especially as far as low snow totals go. So moving on, what's happening now? As we look at the satellite picture across the Bering Sea, you can see a lot of low clouds still hovering across the southern and eastern Bering Sea coast. High pressure is still in charge here and will continue to be so. It's moving moisture from the upper atmosphere eastern Asia from west to east, and the storm track is well south of Alaska, and it's going to stay there for the next couple days. Here's a visible satellite picture, and we have low pressure across the Gulf. This is the low that our friends in Juneau were talking about yesterday on Facebook. This is tracking to the north and east, and this is going to bring in some rain and some stronger winds and probably some thunderstorms tomorrow morning for areas from Yakutat to the northern entrances of Cross Sound. To the west of that, considerably drier air for places like Kodiak and east of Sand Point, a fairly smooth sailing there. Plenty of cloud cover, though, across the Alaska Range out toward southwestern Alaska and the Alcan from Northway to Eagle and all the way east of Arctic Village. A lot of convection today. Showers and thunderstorms were firing up around Dawson, Northway, and east of Fairbanks, and we're still picking up quite a bit of smoke here around the Yukon Valley as well. Northward, you can see cloud cover moving in from northwest to south and east. Another disturbance is moving in off the Chukchi Sea. Winds will be coming in from the south and west in the coming days, and you'll see the winds switching around a little bit stronger tomorrow. You'll notice a lot of very flat clouds across the Bering, of course. That's the fog and stratus that we're seeing, and another wave of low pressures working across the central Aleutians. This is bringing in more of a southeasterly flow and some stronger winds for the next couple days across the central chain. Rain will eventually move into places like Unalaska and Nikolsky as the winds start to settle down heading into the holiday weekend. Today's weather map shows the low pressure system across the Gulf at 1,025 millibars. High pressure still in charge of areas around the Dixon entrance. You can see some of the clearer skies there. Rainfall's moving in from west to east, and we have some stronger winds across the northern Gulf right now. You'll see those falling off fairly quickly, though, as high pressure moves in. Showers and thunderstorms were noted around Eagle and points further east this afternoon, and low pressure and several waves of low pressure working across the Arctic coast and near the Bering Strait earlier today. And there's our other Aleutian low at 1,003 millibars. High pressure sitting just off the southwestern coast, keeping a lot of fog and stable air in place around the Pribilofs and many areas around Cold Bay today too. Tonight's forecast shows low pressure still tracking northward toward Yakutat. A frontal boundary will stretch across southeastern Alaska, bringing some light rainfall to the region there. Showers and thunderstorms are expected to cross some of the higher terrain across the Alaska Range and closer to the Alcan border and points north. That will continue the threat of smoke across some of the Yukon Valley and into the Tanana Valley. Fairbanks has had trouble with that throughout most of the daytime today. 1,005 millibar low there, just northwest of Barrow as the ice continues to recede. Looks for high pressure north of the Beaufort Seacoast at 1,014 millibars. That'll likely keep some fog in that region. Low pressure continues to stretch a frontal boundary around it to the north and to the west. That'll eventually start to fall apart. Look for light rainfall across the central and eastern chain tonight as some of the stronger winds move through tomorrow. Again, nothing terribly strong, probably some gales in many areas. Around south and eastern sections of the Aleutian chain, 1,001 millibar low brings in south and easterly winds there with some light rainfall. High pressure sitting off the YK coast at 1,021 millibars will keep fog locked into parts of Norton Sound, as well as many areas in the north and western parts of the Bering Sea. Showers and thunderstorms are expected again more in widely scattered fashion for places like Rainy and Windy Pass and eastward toward Tanita Pass and up toward areas around the Alcan border and Old Crow. Most of the focus will continue shifting eastward as we go into the holiday weekend, with high pressure taking charge of the eastern Gulf at 1,027 millibars. The stronger winds will start to subside across southeast, but rainfall may still be an issue for your day on Thursday. Heading into Friday, the high pressure system starts creeping northward a little bit more. That'll break up more clouds across central and southern parts of the Panhandle. Look for light rain to continue around Haines and Skagway, maybe as far south as Juneau. Westward, the sunshine should start to break up across parts of Prince William Sound, south central Alaska, and the Kenai Peninsula, and areas around southwestern Alaska as the ridge of high pressure tries to connect here across some parts of western Alaska. Showers and thunderstorms will shift their focus a little bit further north and east. That'll mainly keep some shower potential across the Talkeetnas and northward into the Susitna Valley. The best threat of rainfall, though, probably a little bit further north and east than that. Look for showers across the central and eastern Brooks Range as well as the North Slope. With high pressure up across Barrow, you'll see some reduction in cloud cover there. High pressure just north of Nunivak Island at 1,021 millibars will shift a little bit more of that drier air eastward, and low pressure starting to break up there a little bit and relax its grip on the central chain, with some of the stronger winds shifting into the open waters of the Bering over the Pribilofs and eastward toward Dutch Harbor, Unalaska, and the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula. With warmer air working northward, we're expecting a warm-up as we head into Saturday and Sunday for south, central, and southwestern Alaska. Temperature-wise now, 50s and 60s for a large part of southeast today. Areas around Annette and Ketchikan were nearly 70 degrees. Hyder made it to that point. Juneau was a little bit closer to 60 degrees, as was Sitka at 58. Prince William Sound saw temperatures in the upper 50s and lower 60s. Valdez with a little bit of an east wind late today, 63 degrees there. 59 in Anchorage, 52 around Talkeetna, 47 in Healy, 49 around Fort Greely, and 59 in Smoke in Fairbanks today. 58 for Eagle. Tanana was 70 degrees and warmer. 72 around Fort Yukon and 64 around AKwx Pass. 40s and 50s for most inland areas in the Arctic coast. Barrow was only 48, about the same there for Wainwright. 40s and 50s around Kotzebue Sound. Kivalina showed 48 degrees. Tin City 40. It looked like Nome was 44. Unalakleet closer to 50 degrees with Galena at 66. McGrath was a pleasant 58 degrees this afternoon. A hair cooler in Bethel with Nunivak Island reporting 52. St. Lawrence Island was 45 degrees. A hair warmer around St. Paul, and St. George was in the 50s today. 50s and 60s for the Alaska Peninsula. 61 in Sand Point and Chignik. 63 a little bit further south. 58 degrees around Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, and 40s and 50s for the central and western chain. Overnight low temperatures will stay mild for the interior as moisture starts to move in from the south and west, and where it's already in place, places like Fort Yukon will stay even warmer at 54 degrees thanks to moisture and the heat you've already seen today. 30s and 40s for the Arctic coast. The Seward Peninsula will stay in the lower to mid-40s. Southwest in the 40s and 50s. Around Bristol Bay, 53 in Dillingham, 51 in Kodiak. 40s for the Aleutian Chain, and low to mid-50s for southeast, with south central in the upper 40s. And highs tomorrow in the upper 60s around the Susitna Valley, with lower 60s around Anchorage. Prince William Sound in the mid-60s. Kodiak looking at 66. 50s and 60s for the Alaska Peninsula and the Chain. 50 for St. Paul. Looks like McGrath will make it to the lower 60s tomorrow afternoon. Nome closer to 50 degrees, 48 in Barrow. And Fort Yukon and Minnie in the middle Tanana Valley will see highs in the upper 60s to even mid-70s. A few could be a little bit warmer. Flying weather includes MVFR conditions, especially in the morning for the Alaska Range and points north into the upper Yukon Valley. The southeast looking at MVFR conditions through a large part of the day. And for the west and the Bering Sea, expect IFR conditions thanks to the stratus and fog there. The Chukchi Seacoast and parts of the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast could also be expecting IFR conditions through most of your Thursday. Now, AKwx Pass and Adigan Pass, we expect to see VFR through most of the day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will start with MVFR conditions. Could end the day with showers and thunderstorms, though. The same goes for Rainy Pass. Look for some improvements in overall visibility. The ceiling and visibility should improve through Windy Pass during the day, but only to MVFR. Look for showers and thunderstorms there. VFR conditions expected to break out for Isabel Pass. Watch for convection during the day. And for Mentasta Pass, MVFR should last through most of the day. Showers and thunderstorms will be watched. And for, looks like Tanita Pass, MVFR conditions, expecting some improvement during the day with showers and thunderstorms there. And for Portage Pass, we expect VFR conditions to develop through the day. Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect MVFR conditions through most of the day to last through Thursday. Now, freezing levels still shows our pocket of cold air across the north and eastern Gulf. Freezing levels rise to 8, 10, even 12,000 feet, even 14,000 feet if you move south of the Queen Charlotte's there. Out across the Bering Strait, 8 to 10,000 feet across the Bering Strait and westward. And there's some warmer air lifting northward there on the south side of low pressure just south of the Aleutians. Icing potential is still pretty limited and pretty high up there, about 10,000 feet or so in most cases. Watch for isolated threats from severe icing around any convection or towers that develop there, of course. That's always a good rule. And just north of the Aleutians to Unalaska and Dutch Harbor and Nikolsky above 10,000 feet. Again, light to isolated moderate icing is possible there. For the jet stream, high pressure sitting across eastern Asia is guiding in drier, cooler air through the Bering Strait. You can see the main storm track here coming out of Asia, taking a dip with a trough of low pressure sitting very close to the Aleutians. Another wave there right around Whitehorse is guiding in winds right in from the west to southeastern Alaska, 65 to 95 knots, and we have more of a southwesterly flow moving off the Arctic coast at around 50 knots. The overall pattern is showing a ridge of high pressure across the west coast. If you've got travel plans that take you anywhere on the west coast, they're experiencing pretty hot weather right now and will into the weekend. Look for a trough of low pressure moving across the mainland there at 9,000 feet. That's guiding in winds from 15 to 20 knots. You see slightly stronger winds north of Barrow. Southerlies moving across the central and eastern chain and across the Alaska Peninsula at 20 to 40 knots, and more of a westerly flow now coming into southeastern Alaska. At 3,000 feet, our ridge is centered a little bit closer to Bristol Bay. That's guiding in some of the stronger winds for the central and eastern chain, 25 to 35 knots at 3,000 feet. The trough is guiding in winds across the Seward Peninsula and the Arctic coast, about 15 to 20 knots, and low pressure sitting across the central part of the Yukon Territory, guiding in winds across the northern Gulf and southeastern Alaska at 15 to 20 knots. The turbulence then is also fairly limited, generally below 4,000 feet across the northern Gulf and across the eastern Aleutians, the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula, all the way out towards Shemya. Watch for showers and thunderstorms to produce isolated severe turbulence there, and just north of Barrow you might run into some bumps, light to isolated moderate as possible there, generally below 4,000 feet. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with your marine weather here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
What is it about the ocean that attracts so many of us? We like to play in it, get our food from it, build our houses near it, and gaze out at it. Our economy depends on the goods that come in and go out through our major ports. The ocean makes us feel good, contributes to our economic growth, and we like to be close to it. It's not surprising then that almost half of our population lives near the coastline. But working and playing along the coast is not always serene. Powerful coastal storms can raise the water level significantly, 20 feet or even more, causing loss of life, destroying homes, businesses, and property. Hurricanes like Katrina and Ike showed us firsthand the risks that coastal communities face.
It was 32 feet. We went through the first floor to the second floor, through the attic. The water came up to us like here on the roof. And we talking about swimming to the tree. And luckily, it subsided.
With ocean waters warming and sea levels rising, it is likely that the U.S. will encounter future storms equally as harmful and costly. And with so many people living along the coast, the stakes are getting higher each year. Storm destruction is rarely limited to lost lives and property. Instruments collecting water level and meteorological information must be located in harm's way so they can deliver data critical for flooding forecasts and emergency evacuations. But all too often, these stations are damaged or destroyed during the very times we need them. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, has responded to this dilemma by strengthening some of its storm tide stations. Known as NOAA Sentinels of the Coast, these platforms are single-pile, 4 feet in diameter structures that stand at least 20 feet above the sea surface and are driven 60 to 100 feet into the seafloor for stability. For over 200 years, NOAA has monitored the rise and fall of tides using the latest technology. Beginning with human observers in the early 19th century, NOAA has harnessed technology to operate its network of tide stations that automatically collect accurate and reliable data every 6 minutes. Today, NOAA maintains more than 200 permanent water level observing stations. NOAA's goal is to ensure that the public has advance notice based on the most accurate and up-to-date storm tide and meteorological information. This is only possible, however, when the tide stations operate throughout the storm. So Sentinels are designed to withstand a Category 4 hurricane, with winds up to 155 miles per hour and storm surges of nearly 20 feet above normal. Planning, design, construction, and operation required a team of experts in surveying, engineering, pile installation, oceanography, quality control, and web expertise. With new technology, NOAA is better meeting the needs of coastal communities. Lives are often at stake during the 24 hours before a major storm. Once floodwaters begin to rise, it becomes critical to know which evacuation routes are passable.
Having this kind of immediate real-time data up close that our community has access to is critical for us in our day-to-day operations.
Each sentinel will report real-time water level and meteorological observations. Water level measurements are precisely referenced to ensure that coastal communities can make informed decisions to elevate housing, build levees, and plan evacuation routes. In addition to storm tide reporting, the products that result from NOAA's instruments also contribute to safe navigation, accurate charting, marine engineering, sea level change monitoring, and other important activities.
Before we send crews out, we always check the tides, because being in South Louisiana, you have to make sure your barges and boats can get in before you can even begin your work. So the tide information is very important.
The first sentinels were constructed along the Gulf Coast at Calcasieu Pass, Amarada Pass, and Shell Beach in Louisiana, and Bay Waveland in Mississippi. Hurricanes Gustav and Ike tested the sentinels within weeks of installation. Standing strong, they delivered storm tide data, which were used by emergency responders as well as thousands of coastal residents. More sentinels are planned and will be built at exposed coastal locations as funding becomes available. Other stations in less exposed areas will be elevated above storm surge range on substantial structures. Coastal communities must be ever vigilant. Even tropical storms can deal a massive blow to many residents, especially storms that make landfall on a high tide. Sentinels are designed to serve the over 150 million residents of coastal communities, planning for the worst and hoping that we never need those plans. However, if the unthinkable happens, NOAA Sentinels will be there standing tall, providing a safe haven for instruments that are vital to planning for and responding to nature's fury.
Time for a look at today's sea ice edge, and just north and west of Barrow you can see an awful lot of open water. Not a whole lot of changes from yesterday. The ice continues its retreat, and by the end of the week probably see some changes on the order of 10 to about 15 nautical miles. You can check on the ice conditions, use the interactive map, and read the outlook anytime you want by going to weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. Here's a look at the outlook now for southeastern Alaska's marine areas. Looks like 20 to 30 knots with winds from the south in the North and South Lynn Canal with 4 to 6 feet there for Thursday afternoon. As you get into Stevens Passage and areas around Petersburg, you're looking at more of a southerly flow, 30 knots with a 6-foot sea, and southeasterlies in the Clarence Strait with 4-foot seas there on a 20-knot wind. Now, outer coastal areas are still looking at that southwesterly flow as low pressures working in from the southwest to north and east. You'll see some stronger winds on Thursday, and conditions rapidly improve for Friday with hanging on to a stronger southerly flow in the Lynn Canal. 10 to 15 knot winds a little bit further south, more of a northwesterly flow developing in the Clarence Strait. Otherwise, an onshore westerly flow from Yakutat all the way down to the Dixon entrance at 10 to 15 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas on Friday. For south central Alaska, a broad westerly flow working across the Barren Islands at 25 knots and diminishing as you move further eastward. A westerly flow inside of Prince William Sound at 10 knots outside. That's 20 knots with a 6 to 7 foot sea in the north and western Gulf. A southwesterly flow up to 25 knots for the Shelikof Strait with an 8-foot sea, otherwise light southerlies working up Cook Inlet with seas around 3 feet and winds around 10 knots. For Friday, a variable flow inside of Prince William Sound and outside, about 10 knots there. Northern Cook Inlet around 10 knots with a 2-foot sea. A south and easterly flow developing across the Barren Islands and Kodiak Island, 15 to 25 knots. There outside of Resurrection Bay, you're looking at 15 knots with a 5-foot sea. Across the Alaska Peninsula now and inside Bristol Bay, a westerly wind, 15 knots with a 2-foot sea. Easterly south of Sand Point and King Cove up to 25 knots with a 7-foot sea. Southwesterly still working into Castle Cape at 15 knots with a 4-foot sea. Those become southeasterly as well on Friday and come up to 25 knots. 30-knot winds there south of Sand Point. Across the Bering Sea coast, 25 knots with a 5-foot sea are expected there for Friday afternoon. For the Aleutians, you can see the easterly winds feeding into low pressure right about here as we head into Thursday. A variable flow south of Adak and Atka, a little bit less at 15 knots with a 10-foot sea. Otherwise, northeasterlies from Kiska all the way out toward Attu at 20 knots with a 6 to 7-foot sea. Low pressure doesn't move a whole lot more for Friday. It's still sitting just south of Adak and Atka with a southeasterly flow. A little bit more easterly winds there for Unalaska and Nikolsky at 25 to 30 knots with 9 to 12-foot seas on the Pacific side, and north and easterly winds out in the west with 8-foot seas there on a 20-knot wind. For the west coast, southwesterlies continue for St. Matthew Island waters northward towards St. Lawrence Island at 15 to 25 knots. Light and variable winds from Hooper Bay southward into the Kuskokwim Bay and a broad easterly flow sweeping over the Pribilofs at 20 knots with a 5-foot sea. For Friday, the easterlies continue to work off the southern coast, 20 to 25 knots with 3-foot seas closer to the mainland and 7-foot seas over the Pribilofs. A southwesterly flow continues into the Bering Strait and Norton Sound at 20 knots, and east and northeasterly winds north of Nunivak Island and westward into the St. Matthew Island waters with seas ranging from 3 to 5 feet. For the Arctic coast, look for east and southeasterly winds over the Beaufort Sea and the ice there, 15 to 25 knots. For the Chukchi Sea, 20 to 25 knot winds there with 4 to 5-foot seas from Point Lay southward to areas outside of Kotzebue Sound. For Friday, the winds diminish in most areas. We'll get into a northwesterly flow from Barrow to Kaktovik. Winds really diminish north of Point Lay down to 5 knots with a 2-foot sea, and southeasterly winds from Cape Lisburne into areas around Kotzebue Sound at 15 knots with a 3-foot sea. Let's recap tonight's weather. Flash or flood watches for areas in the higher terrain in the Yukon Flats and southward into the Deltana and Tanana Flats for smaller streams there. Watch for some periods of heavier rain up to an inch to inch and a half. Great for wildfires, bad news if you live next to a river, but we need the rain in a big way. Low pressure is working north and east into southeastern Alaska. We'll see areas of widely scattered showers and storms across the eastern interior, and low pressure takes over the Aleutians again tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.